Of course it won't work. Story of my life. Okay, well, apparently this hates me, so I'm gonna have to do Netflix again.
The average American now carries 23 extra pounds.
Heart disease and stroke will claim the lives of 460,000 American women.
69 grams of fat. You could actually save 12 grams of the fat and half the calories if you simply ate an entire stick of butter.
We're talking about diabetes and hypertension and bone diseases, osteoporosis.
Prostate cancer is now the most common cancer in American men.
Doctors say we really need to eat less red and processed meat.
On arteriosclerosis and cancer and autoimmune disease.
We have unprecedented amount of type 2 diabetes in our children, and we're starting to see hypertension in our children in grammar school.
In case you're wondering, 2,120 calories.
Clearly, the Western diet is taking a toll. This should serve as a wake-up call. We have a growing problem, and the ones who are growing are us.
Food. It's central to our lives and traditions. Every special occasion seems to involve food and feasting. But could some of these same foods, including several that we think are good for our health, also be causing many of our most serious health problems? Indeed, we're facing a massive health crisis. No less than 40% of Americans today are obese, and about half of us are taking some form of prescription drug.
The best-known statin drug, Lipitor, is the most prescribed drug ever in the world.
Almost 1 in 5 American 4-year-olds are now considered to be obese.
Though Mexican-American and African-American children are still more likely to be overweight.
This could be the first generation of children in the United States that lives less than its parents.
We spend $2.2 trillion a year on health care, over 5 times more than the defense budget. In fact, we pay more per person for health care than any industrialized country in the world. Yet we're sicker than ever.
You see, there's no money in healthy people, and there's no money in dead people. The money is in the middle. People who are alive, sort of, but with one or more chronic conditions.
Obesity, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure are all diet-related health issues that cost this country more than $120 billion each year.
Every minute, a person in the U.S. is killed by heart disease. 1,500 people a day die from cancer. Combined, these two diseases kill over 1 million Americans every year. Cases of diabetes are skyrocketing, particularly among our younger population.
Diabetes.
Life-threatening diabetes.
1 out of 3 people born in the U.S. today will develop this crippling condition during their lifetime. Millions of others suffer from a host of degenerative diseases. Millions more of us are so stimulated by sugar, coffee, and energy drinks that we've masked our chronic fatigue. But could there be a single solution to all of these problems? A solution so comprehensive, yet so straightforward, that it's mind-boggling that more of us haven't taken it seriously?
Someone has to stand up and say that the answer isn't another pill. The answer is spinach.
A growing number of researchers claim that if we eliminate or greatly reduce refined, processed, and animal-based foods, we can prevent, and in certain cases even reverse, several of our worst diseases. They say all we need to do is adopt a whole foods, plant-based diet. It sounds almost too simple to be true. You might not expect someone like me to explore the connection between diet and disease. On my way over, I drank these 2 Red Bulls. I also had a 12-ounce Coke and another half of a 12-ounce Coke. I haven't always lived the healthiest lifestyle, and I've eaten more than my share of fast food. But as part of my effort to learn more about the link between food and health, I visited 2 physicians in Los Angeles, Dr. Matt Lederman and Dr. Alona Pulday.
Hi. How you doing? Please, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too.
Is Dr. Pulday?
Dr. Pulday, pleasure to meet you, too. Both are MDs. Dr. Lederman was trained in internal medicine and Dr. Pulday in family practice. They incorporate a whole plant foods nutrition plan into the treatment of their patients.
So let's get started on that, and then we'll do some talking. 142.82.
I found out a lot more than I expected. Like a lot of Americans, I thought my health was pretty good. I had no major diseases that I knew of. But I hadn't had a thorough checkup in a while, so I decided to get one. When Dr. Lederman gave me the results, it was a real wake-up call. I gotta say, I'm kind of shocked. I'm really worried about my blood work numbers. 240, 241 for my cholesterol is way higher than it's ever been. I got this 6 number. That, to me, is the most worrying number I got. The 6 number was the result of something called a CRP test, which measures the inflammation in my heart and blood vessels. This put me in the high-risk category for a heart attack. So I committed to a 12-week nutrition program under Dr. Lederman's supervision. The plan was to treat my health problems by eating a whole foods, plant-based diet. The idea of using nutrition to promote good health is nothing new. Indeed, Hippocrates, the ancient Greek father of Western medicine, said, "Let food be thy medicine," over 2,000 years ago. Yet it wasn't until more recently that the science behind this observation was systematically probed and applied. 2 researchers who've made groundbreaking contributions to this effort are Dr. Colin Campbell and Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. Born just a few months apart in 1933 and 34, they each grew up on farms. Campbell's childhood farm is in rural Virginia, where his family raised dairy cattle and milked cows.
My dad and mother moved here in 1943 when I was 9 years old. And during that time, we had a dairy of about somewhere between 20 and 30 cows, which in those days was a modest, medium-sized dairy.
At the time, milk was believed to be nature's perfect food. So perfect, in fact, that this U.S. government film from the early 20th century recommended that infants who have just been weaned from their mother's milk should be switched immediately to cow's milk.
That was the excitement of doing something, producing nature's perfect food, if you will.
Established in 1675, the Esselstyn's farm is in upstate New York. On these rolling hillsides, they grazed both beef and dairy cattle.
This was sort of like the nerve center of the operation in a way?
More or less, absolutely. This was sort of the epicenter around these barns. This is the way farming was done in that area.
And so this is sort of where you learned the craft of the trade of farming. How old were you when you moved here again?
7. I didn't start driving the tractor until I was 8 years old.
A late bloomer, right?
Exactly. But I enjoyed it, and I really got a great kick out of doing the farm work.
Although they didn't know each other yet, farm life had a deep and lasting influence on both Campbell and Esselstyn.
To make it successful, you had to have persistence, staying power, and tenacity of purpose.
I guess it's ironic in the sense that we're both now advocating not consuming the products that we were busy actually producing with our families.
During Campbell and Esselstyn's lifetimes, the American diet has changed dramatically. Near the beginning of the 20th century, Americans each ate about 120 pounds of meat annually. By 2007, that figure had exploded to no less than 222 pounds. In 1913, we ate about 40 pounds of processed sugar each per year. However, by 1999, our consumption of all refined sweeteners had risen to over 147 pounds. In 1909, Americans consumed around 294 pounds of dairy products apiece. But by 2006, our yearly intake of dairy had more than doubled to 605 pounds. By the early 1950s, Campbell was off to college at Penn State, while Esselstyn went to Yale. As part of Yale's rowing team, Esselstyn won an Olympic gold medal in 1956. During this same decade, the pace of American life was accelerating, even with our food. The late 50s was the heyday of the drive-in burger joint. The supermarket was just beginning to thrive in the newly built post-World War II suburbs. This was when the so-called convenience foods were born, like the legendary foil-wrapped TV dinner, not to mention a host of other tasty processed delicacies devised to make our lives easier and better. By now, Colin Campbell was in graduate school at Cornell University, which had one of the most prestigious nutritional science departments in the country. His research was on animal nutrition and biochemistry.
But it was focused more on feeding animals for their ability to be able to produce meat, milk, and eggs, protein containing. And so my own research was focused on protein, making sure we got enough. It was considered to be the vital nutrient. It was one of the first nutrients discovered. And without protein, the animal would die. So it was a life force. And in fact, in even the early 1900s, there were statements made that this is the stuff of civilization itself.
Protein was also nearly synonymous with animal-based foods like meat. It still is today, all over America.
Why do you think meat is important in our diet?
Protein.
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 A lot of protein.
We need protein, don't we? We can't live without protein.
The idea that plants had protein also didn't come into play until maybe the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then it struggled through the years.
No matter what source the protein came from, in the late 1950s, most scientists believed the world needed a lot more of it.
We had a lot of starving and malnourished children in the world. And so in my community, in the nutrition community, there were discussions about why so, what could be done. And one of the prominent thoughts was to make sure they get enough protein. I certainly went along with this view.
At about the same time, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn was just beginning his medical career at the world-famous Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, Ohio. Surgery soon became his specialty.
There's something awfully satisfying about if you can remove the disease. For instance, if a patient had gallstones, you could remove them. If it was a gastric ulcer or a stomach ulcer, you directly take care of that. If it's a hernia, the same thing.
During the 1960s, heart disease was on the rise in the U.S. What doctors commonly call coronary artery disease is usually caused by a condition of the arteries that supply the heart with blood. What happens is that over time, a fatty substance in the bloodstream called cholesterol builds up in the coronary arteries, restricting the blood flow to the heart. This can ultimately cause several problems, from severe chest pain called angina to heart attacks. Cholesterol is a natural substance produced by all animals, including humans, and it's an essential component of our cells' walls. But when we consume dietary cholesterol, which is only found in animal foods like meat, eggs, and dairy products, it tends to stay in the bloodstream. This so-called plaque is what collects on the inside of our blood vessels and is the major cause of coronary artery disease. In the late 1960s, a colleague of Dr. Esselstyn's at the Cleveland Clinic made a major breakthrough in the treatment of this condition. In fact, Esselstyn shared space with him in the clinic's surgical locker room. His name was Dr. Rene Favallaro.
Rene really sparkled in the operating room, and in 1967 he did his first bypass graft at the clinic, coronary artery bypass graft.
This revolutionary new procedure was accomplished by removing a vein from the patient's leg, then stitching it on the heart's blocked coronary artery to allow the blood to flow around or bypass the blockage. Today, over 500,000 Americans go under the knife annually for heart bypass surgery, costing around $100,000 apiece. These operations alone constitute a staggering total of nearly $50 billion. Joey Aucoin lives in Tampa, Florida, where he owns and operates a landscaping company.
I tell everybody, the joke with everybody with me is, I don't eat to live, I live to eat. And my whole life, I ate whatever I wanted.
In 2004, doctors discovered Joey had a dangerously high cholesterol level of 320 and a hazardous blood sugar level of 480. This not only made him a type 2 diabetic, but a prime candidate for a heart attack and a stroke.
This is my daily pill regimen. I got 2 pills I take for my diabetes, then I got 1 for cholesterol, 1 for high blood pressure, and then I take Byetta, which is an injectable medicine, every morning before breakfast and every night before dinner. And that's what I've been doing for almost 4 years now. And I know it makes me tired, and I just don't feel normal. I only sleep 4 hours a night or so. I just hate taking them.
In the mid-1960s, Dr. Campbell was in the Philippines, trying to get more protein to millions of malnourished children. To keep costs down, he and his colleagues decided not to use animal-based protein. The program was beginning to show success. But then Dr. Campbell stumbled onto a piece of information that was extremely important. It centered on the more affluent families in the Philippines, who were eating relatively high amounts of animal-based foods.
But at the same time, they were the ones most likely to have the children who were susceptible to getting liver cancer.
This was very unusual, since liver cancers are mainly found in adults.
But just the mere fact that they occurred in children said, there's something here. This is pretty significant.
Shortly afterward, Dr. Campbell came across a scientific paper published in a little-known Indian medical journal. It detailed work that had been done on a population of experimental rats that were first exposed to a carcinogen called aflatoxin, then fed a diet of casein, the main protein found in milk.
They were testing the effect of protein on the development of liver cancer. They used 2 different levels of protein. They used 20% of total calories, and then they used a much lower level, 5%. 20% turned on cancer, 5% turned it off.
This Indian paper, together with what Dr. Campbell had learned about increased liver cancers in children eating animal-based foods, combined to create a decisive moment in his work and his life.
Because we learned that animal protein was really good in turning on cancer.
During the same time, the way Americans ate was changing, again. The number of fast food franchises was exploding, as more and more overscheduled Americans began using them as a convenient way to feed themselves and their families. While the fast food revolution was sweeping the nation, the rate of cancer deaths in America was continuing to rise. As a result, in 1971, President Richard Nixon initiated a program that was dubbed the War on Cancer.
We are here today for the purpose of signing the Cancer Act of 1971. And I hope that in the years ahead, that we may look back on this day and this action as being the most significant action taken during this administration.
On the front lines of this new war was Caldwell Esselstyn. By 1978, he was chairman of the Breast Cancer Task Force at the Cleveland Clinic. Yet he soon began to doubt the medical procedures he was using.
No matter how many of these operations I was doing for women for breast cancer, I wasn't doing one single thing for the next unsuspecting victim.
So Dr. Esselstyn started investigating the global statistics on breast cancer. One of the facts he discovered was that the incidence of breast cancer in Kenya was far lower than it was in the United States. In fact, in 1978, the chances of a woman getting breast cancer in Kenya were 82 times lower than in the U.S. Dr. Esselstyn was even more surprised by the numbers he discovered for some other types of cancer.
In the entire nation of Japan in 1958, how many autopsy-proven deaths were there from cancer of the prostate? 18. 18 in the entire nation. That, to me, was about the most mind-boggling public health figure that I think I'd ever encountered.
In the same year, the U.S. population was only about twice the size of Japan's, yet the number of prostate cancer deaths exceeded 14,000. Dr. Esselstyn also discovered that in the early 1970s, the risk for heart disease in rural China was 12 times lower than it was in the U.S. And in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, heart disease was rarely encountered. The link he noted between all the areas he studied was simple.
Virtually, the Western diet was non-existent. They had no animal products. They had no dairy, no meat.
Even more compelling to Esselstyn was some historical data that had long been overlooked. In World War II, the Germans occupied Norway.